What would actually happen if one modern U.S. Marine squad faced off against an entire Roman legion under Julius Caesar? It's a question that sounds absurd on the surface, but the answer reveals something fascinating about the gap between ancient and modern warfare. If you're interested in military history and the incredible evolution of combat technology, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our deep dives into these kinds of strategic matchups. Let's set the stage. A Roman legion in Caesar's time consisted of roughly 5,000 soldiers, divided into 10 cohorts of about 500 men each. These weren't conscripts or peasants. They were professional soldiers, hardened by campaigns across Gaul and beyond. Each legionnaire wore segmented armor, carried a gladius sword, and wielded a pilum, a javelin designed to penetrate shields and disable enemies before close combat began. They moved as a coordinated unit, formed into tight ranks, and relied on discipline and cohesion to dominate their enemies. Now contrast this with a modern U.S. Marine squad. A typical squad consists of 13 Marines, a squad leader, 2 fire team leaders, and 10 riflemen and support personnel. Each Marine carries an M16A4 or M4 carbine rifle, capable of accurately firing rounds at distances that would seem like magic to a Roman soldier. They wear body armor made from advanced ceramics and steel, helmets with night vision capability, and load-bearing vests equipped with spare ammunition magazines. They train constantly, not just in marksmanship, but in small unit tactics, communication, and rapid decision-making under extreme stress. The fundamental difference between these two forces comes down to the reach of their weapons and the speed of their firepower. A legionnaire with a pilum could throw his javelin perhaps 30 to 40 meters with any real accuracy. A Marine with a rifle can hit targets accurately at 300 meters or more. That means a single Marine squad could begin inflicting casualties on a Roman legion from a distance where the Romans couldn't possibly respond. The legion would have no way to strike back. Let's imagine this scenario playing out in a large open field, perhaps near the ruins of an ancient Roman forum, with marble columns standing in the distance. The legion approaches in perfect formation, their bronze eagle standards gleaming in the sunlight, their armor reflecting off the polished marble ruins around them. The Marine squad, positioned on high ground with clear sight lines, maintains discipline and waits for the optimal moment to open fire. The instant the legionnaires come within 300 meters, the Marines begin their assault. The sound would be utterly alien to Roman ears, like nothing they'd ever experienced. 5 rifles, firing in controlled bursts, could deliver hundreds of rounds per minute. A legionnaire struck by a modern rifle round would drop instantly, and there would be no way for Roman medicine to save him. Infection from such wounds was nearly certain death, and that's if the round didn't cause catastrophic organ damage or arterial rupture immediately. The Roman response would be chaos. Officers would try to march the legion forward, assuming they could close the distance and engage in hand-to-hand combat, where the legionnaires had some chance of success. But Marines are trained extensively in suppressive fire tactics. They would adjust their aim, concentrate on targets that posed threats, and maintain accuracy while moving and repositioning. The legion's tight formation, so effective against sword-wielding opponents, becomes a liability under rifle fire. Concentrated groups of soldiers make excellent targets. As the legion advances, perhaps half their force would be casualty or dead before they closed even half the distance. Modern rifles don't just wound. They kill with mechanical certainty. Legionnaires trained to push through wounds and reach their enemies would find themselves unable to function. The psychological impact would be devastating. These soldiers had never encountered anything like this. Their entire tactical doctrine was built on the assumption that they could reach their enemies and settle matters with blade and strength. But the Marines wouldn't stand and fight at close range. This is another critical advantage. As the legion desperately tried to close the gap, the Marine squad would execute a controlled withdrawal, still firing, still maintaining their formation, still ensuring accurate shots. This is called a fighting retreat, and it's a fundamental tactic in modern warfare. The The Romans had no concept of this. They believed in holding ground or charging forward, not in the subtle art of trading distance for firepower. Imagine the scene. Legionnaires in their red tunics and segmented armor, shields raised, moving forward in disciplined ranks. Behind them, Roman officers on horseback trying to maintain command. But around them, soldiers are falling, not to arrows from distance, but to invisible impacts that punch through armor as if it were cloth. The eagles on the Roman standards would be surrounded by confusion and mounting dread. Now let's address some complexities. What if the legion somehow managed to reach the Marines? In hand-to-hand combat, the legionnaires had genuine advantages. They were trained swordsmen. A Roman gladius is a devastating close-quarters weapon. But this scenario requires a fundamental change in assumptions. The Marines would have to allow the legion to close the distance. With their superior firepower and training, there's no tactical reason they ever would. A Marine isn't going to let himself get dragged into close quarters when he can maintain a distance where his weapons are supreme. Moreover, Marines train in hand-to-hand combat too. They're not purely gunfighters. If push came to shove, a modern Marine in body armor, trained in contemporary martial arts, and potentially armed with a bayonet attached to his rifle, would have significant advantages over a legionnaire, despite the gladius being an excellent sword. The Marine's armor is more advanced, his physical conditioning is designed for modern combat scenarios, and his training emphasizes adaptability. Let's consider another variable. What if the battle took place in terrain that favored the legion? Roman soldiers were renowned for their ability to fight in complex terrain and maintain unit cohesion. What if the battlefield was broken up with aqueducts, marble forums, and stone structures? In such an environment, the Marines' advantage in long-range firepower becomes slightly less dominant, but it doesn't disappear. Trained in urban warfare and building-clearing operations, Marines understand how to use terrain and structures to maintain their advantage. They would use the aqueducts and forum ruins as defensive positions, maintaining their elevated firing positions, controlling key intersections, and ensuring the legion could never muster a coordinated assault. The legion might inflict some casualties, even in this scenario. Legionnaires were smart soldiers. They understood tactics. Some might find cover, assess the situation, and attempt flanking maneuvers. But without the ability to quickly traverse open ground without getting shredded by rifle fire, such maneuvers would be doomed to failure. For every Marine casualty, the Legion would suffer 20 or more. The attrition rate would be completely one-sided. Consider the logistics and sustainability of the conflict. A Roman legion, even under Caesar's brilliant command, relied on supply lines, food, water, and rest. Marines carry spare ammunition, medical supplies, and water on their persons or in nearby caches. A Marine squad could sustain combat operations far longer than most people realize, especially in a scenario where they're not expending ammunition at maximum rate because they're not facing human wave attacks. They're practicing measured firepower, using ammunition efficiently, and controlling the pace of the engagement. There's also the matter of morale and breaking will. Even the most disciplined soldiers have limits. Watching your comrades fall to invisible fire, unable to strike back, unable to reach your enemies, unable to even comprehend what's happening, breaks something fundamental in human psychology. Roman soldiers were brave, but bravery doesn't overcome physics and gunpowder. At some point, the legion would cease to function as a cohesive unit. Soldiers would flee. Officers would lose command. The formation would dissolve into panicked individuals trying to survive. Some might argue that sheer numbers could overwhelm a small squad, but this ignores firepower ratios. Each Marine can neutralize multiple enemies per minute. The mathematics don't work in the Legion's favor. With 5 trained riflemen maintaining discipline and ammunition discipline, eliminating a force 5,000 strong becomes a matter of time and logistics, not feasibility. It would be grim and gruesome, but it's not in doubt. Let's also acknowledge what we might respect about Roman legionnaires in this context. They were, by any historical standard, elite soldiers. Their training was rigorous. Their discipline was remarkable. If they had modern weapons, they would likely have been devastating. The legionnaires themselves aren't the issue. They're being asked to fight a battle that's fundamentally unfair because the technological gap is so vast. It's not a question of courage or skill in their own context. It's about the incommensurable difference between Bronze Age adjacent weapons and 20th century military technology. This thought experiment reveals something important about military history. It's not that ancient soldiers were inferior people or inherently worse fighters. It's that technology, training, and tactics evolved to exploit that technology. A Roman legion facing another legion might have a remarkably competitive battle. A Marine squad facing another Marine squad would also be competitive. But put them against each other and the gap is absolute. There's a broader lesson here about technological dominance in warfare. Throughout history, forces with superior technology have generally defeated forces without it, often with stunning casualty ratios. When Europeans encountered indigenous peoples with stone weapons, the outcome was never in doubt, despite the indigenous peoples often fighting with tremendous courage and tactical acumen. When tanks first appeared in World War I, they seemed nearly invulnerable because nothing existed to effectively counter them. Technology matters, but technology isn't destiny. Modern warfare proves this. Asymmetrical conflicts, insurgencies, and unconventional tactics can inflict heavy costs on technologically superior forces. What prevents this from happening in our hypothetical scenario is that the Roman legion is trying to fight a conventional battle. If the scenario involved the legion somehow converting to modern tactics instantaneously, they might do better. But that's changing the terms of the question entirely. So what's the final verdict? In any realistic scenario, a single modern U.S. Marine squad would absolutely dominate an entire Roman legion. The gap in firepower, range, accuracy, and rate of fire is so vast that the outcome is essentially predetermined. The legion would suffer catastrophic casualties before closing the distance. And if they did manage to close it, they'd face opponents trained in modern combat and equipped with modern protective gear. Like this video if you found this analysis compelling, because these kinds of military comparisons reveal just how rapidly warfare has evolved. The Romans might win if they could somehow teleport the Marines' ammunition away or disable their weapons, but that's not warfare, that's fantasy. In actual combat, with the forces as described, the Marines would prevail with relatively low casualties, though the exact number would depend on terrain, positioning, and tactical decisions in the moment. This comparison is ultimately a tribute to human innovation and the drive to improve our tools and techniques. It's also a humbling reminder that technological advantage is transient. The weapons that seem invincible today will be obsolete tomorrow. Strategic bombers dominated air warfare until missiles made them vulnerable. Tanks seemed unstoppable until anti-tank weapons proliferated. Today's advantages are tomorrow's challenges. But for now, in this specific scenario, the answer is clear. The modern Marines win decisively. Thank you for joining us on this thought experiment about military history and technological evolution. If you enjoyed exploring these kinds of strategic scenarios and military comparisons, please subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment below with your own scenario or question. Would you want to see us explore a modern military unit versus another historical force? Or would you prefer we dive into different kinds of military comparisons altogether? Your feedback helps us create the content you want to watch.